I thought we'd mastered the rules of our friendship. No flirting, no innuendo, no acknowledgement of what simmered beneath every conversation. For 3 years, we kept those boundaries intact. Then one June night, alone in his apartment after everyone else had left, he looked at me and said something I never expected to hear. Everything we'd carefully avoided rushed forward at once. If this story moves you, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support means the world to me. I met Vin Hardy on a Tuesday morning in early spring, standing in line at a coffee shop on Haywood Road in Greenville, South Carolina. He was arguing good-naturedly with the barista about whether oat milk belonged in espresso. I was behind him, half listening, mostly thinking about the zoning meeting I had in an hour. He turned around, caught my eye, and grinned. "Sorry," he said, "I have opinions." "I noticed," I said. That was it. That was how it started. I'm Tom Efron, and at the time I was 34, working as a municipal cultural heritage planner for the city of Greenville. My job involved reviewing development proposals, ensuring historic properties weren't demolished without cause, and sitting through endless committee meetings. It wasn't glamorous, but I liked the work. It felt like I was protecting something that mattered. Vin, I learned over the next few weeks, was a ceramics restoration specialist. He worked for a private firm that contracted with museums, collectors, and occasionally municipalities like ours. He just moved to Greenville from Asheville to take on a project restoring a collection of antique pottery at the Upcountry History Museum. We kept running into each other, the coffee shop, the farmers market on Saturday mornings, once at the public library on Heritage Green where I was picking up research materials and he was returning a stack of books on Japanese pottery techniques. It became a pattern. We'd talk for a few minutes, exchange pleasantries, and go our separate ways. Then one Saturday in late April, he asked if I wanted to grab lunch. We went to a sandwich place on Main Street. The conversation flowed easily. He told me about growing up in Spartanburg, about studying art history in college and stumbling into ceramics restoration almost by accident. I told him about my work, about how I'd ended up in Greenville after years in Charleston, about the strange satisfaction of arguing over the historical significance of a 19th century storefront. We talked for 2 hours. At the end of it, he said, "We should do this again." I agreed. Over the next few months, we became friends, real friends. We met for coffee, went to gallery openings, hiked the trails at Paris Mountain. He introduced me to his colleagues. I introduced him to mine. It felt natural, uncomplicated, except it wasn't. I noticed things: the way he laughed, tilting his head back slightly, the way he listened, fully present as if nothing else in the world mattered in that moment. The way his hands moved when he talked about his work, precise and expressive. I noticed and I said nothing. Vin was openly gay. He'd mentioned it casually one afternoon, talking about an ex-boyfriend in Asheville. I was too, though I'd been single for a long time and wasn't particularly eager to change that. My last relationship had ended badly, and I'd spent the past 2 years focused on work, on rebuilding a sense of stability. But with Vin, I felt something shift. I didn't act on it. I didn't even acknowledge it to myself, not fully. We fell into a rhythm, and I told myself that friendship was enough. One evening in early June, Vin invited me to a small dinner party at his apartment in the Overbrook neighborhood. It was a modest place, a second-floor unit in an old brick building on Augusta Street. He decorated it carefully with shelves of books, framed prints, and a few pieces of pottery he'd restored himself. There were 6 of us that night. Vin's coworker, a woman named Elaine who worked in museum acquisitions. A couple I didn't know, friends of his from Spartanburg. A guy named Trent who worked at the City Arts Council, someone I'd met in passing at a few events. The evening was easy, warm. We ate pasta and drank wine and talked about everything from local politics to terrible movies we'd loved as kids. Vin was a good host, attentive without being overbearing, making sure everyone felt included. By 10, people started to leave. Elaine had an early meeting. The couple had a long drive back to Spartanburg. Trent left shortly after, citing an early morning run, and then it was just the 2 of us. Vin started clearing plates. I helped carrying dishes to the kitchen while he rinsed and stacked them in the dishwasher. We worked in companionable silence, the kind that comes from knowing someone well enough that words aren't always necessary. When we finished, he poured us each another glass of wine and we moved to the living room. I sat on the couch. He sat in the armchair across from me, curling his legs under him. "Thanks for coming tonight," he said. "Of course it was fun." He smiled, but there was something different in his expression, something I couldn't quite read. "I've been thinking," he said, and then paused. I waited. He looked down at his glass, turning it slowly in his hands. "I've been thinking about us," he said quietly. My heart started to beat faster. "What about us?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up, meeting my eyes. "I like you, Tom, more than I probably should." The room went very still. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to say it back, to admit what I'd been feeling for months, but another part of me was terrified, convinced that saying it out loud would ruin everything. "I don't want to make this weird," he continued. "I value our friendship, I really do, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this." I set my glass down on the coffee table, buying myself a moment. "You're not the only one," I said finally. He blinked. "What? You're not the only one who feels this?" For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then he stood up, crossed the room, and sat down beside me on the couch. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. He reached out, hesitating for just a second, and then took my hand. His touch was warm, steady. I looked down at our hands, then back up at him. "I don't know what this means," I said. "I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I," he said, "but I think we should try." We stayed like that for a while, sitting close, not saying much. Eventually, he leaned his head against my shoulder. I put my arm around him, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. When I left that night, everything had changed. The next few weeks were strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. We didn't rush into anything. We took our time figuring out what this new version of us looked like. We still met for coffee, still went on hikes, but now there was an openness between us that hadn't been there before. We held hands. We kissed, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. We talked about what we wanted, what scared us, what we hoped for. Vin told me about his last relationship, a 3-year partnership that had ended when his ex decided to move to Atlanta for work and Vin didn't want to leave Asheville. He told me about the loneliness that followed, the way he'd thrown himself into his work to avoid thinking about it. I told him about my ex, a man named Oliver who I'd dated in Charleston. I told him about the fights, the way we'd slowly grown apart, the quiet devastation of realizing that love sometimes isn't enough. We were both cautious, both carrying old wounds. But we were also hopeful. One Saturday in late June, we drove out to Table Rock State Park. It was a bright, clear day, the kind where the sky feels impossibly blue. We hiked the trail to the summit, stopping occasionally to catch our breath and take in the view. At the top, we sat on a flat rock overlooking the valley below. The world stretched out in front of us, green and vast. "I'm glad we're doing this," Vin said. "Me too." He turned to look at me. "I mean it. I know it's new and I know we're both scared. But I'm glad." I reached for his hand. "So am I." We stayed up there for a long time, talking and not talking, just being together, but not everything was easy. There were moments when doubt crept in. Moments when I wondered if we were making a mistake, if we were risking a friendship that had meant so much to both of us. One evening in early July, we had our first real argument. It started over something small. I'd made plans to meet a colleague for drinks without telling Vin, and he'd called me, assuming I was free. When I explained, he sounded hurt. "I didn't realize I needed to check in," I said, more defensively than I intended. "You don't," he said. "I just thought we were spending tonight together. We never confirmed that. I know, forget it," but I couldn't forget it. We met up the next day at his apartment and the tension was still there. "I don't want to be that person," he said, "the one who gets upset because you have a life outside of this. But I also don't want to feel like an afterthought." "You're not an afterthought," I said. "Then what am I?" I hesitated, and that hesitation hurt him more than anything I could have said. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted. "I don't know how to balance everything. I care about you, Vin, I really do, but I'm scared of messing this up." He was quiet for a moment. I'm scared too, he said, but we can't let fear make all our decisions. He was right and I knew it. We talked it through slowly, carefully. We agreed to be more intentional about communication, to check in with each other, to make space for both the relationship and the other parts of our lives. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. By mid-July, things had settled into a new rhythm. Vin's project at the museum was winding down and he was starting to think about what came next. He'd been offered a short-term contract in Colombia restoring a collection of 18th-century porcelain, but he was hesitant to take it. "It's only 6 weeks," he said one evening as we sat on the porch of my house in the Parkins Mill area watching the sun set. "But I don't want to leave right now." "You should take it," I said. "It's a great opportunity." "I know, but I don't want to be away from you." I reached for his hand. "We'll figure it out. 6 weeks isn't forever." He looked at me, searching my face. "You mean that?" "I do." He took the job. The week before he left, we spent as much time together as we could. We went to Falls Park, walked along the Reedy River, had dinner at a quiet restaurant on Main Street. We talked about staying in touch, about visiting each other, about what would happen when he got back. On his last night in Greenville, we stayed up late at his apartment, talking and not wanting the evening to end. "I'm going to miss you," he said. "I'm going to miss you too." He kissed me, slow and tender, and I held on to him like I could stop time. When I left that night, I felt the weight of the distance already. He called me the day he arrived in Colombia. We talked for an hour about the drive, about the apartment he was staying in, about the project he was starting. It felt good to hear his voice, even though I missed him. We talked every day after that. Sometimes it was just a quick check-in a few minutes before bed. Other times we'd talk for an hour or more, sharing the small details of our days, but it wasn't the same. I missed the easy intimacy of being in the same space, the way we'd sit together without needing to fill the silence. I missed his presence, the way he made everything feel a little brighter. 3 weeks in, I drove to Columbia to visit him. It was a Friday evening and I left work early, making the 2-hour drive down I-26. He met me outside his apartment and when I saw him, I felt something settle inside me. We spent the weekend together. He showed me the project he was working on, a painstaking process of piecing together fragments of porcelain and rebuilding what had been lost. We explored downtown Columbia, walked along the riverfront, had brunch at a place on Haywood Street. It was a good weekend, but when I left on Sunday evening, the distance felt even harder. I started counting down the days until he came back. The final week of his contract, he called me late one night. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About what happens when I get back." I waited. "I don't want to keep doing this halfway," he said. "I don't want to keep wondering where this is going. I want to be with you, Tom. Fully, not just as friends who are figuring things out, as partners." My heart was racing. "I want that too," I said. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." I heard him exhale, a sound of relief and joy. "Okay," he said. "Okay, then let's do this." When he came back to Greenville at the end of August, everything felt different. We didn't move in together right away, but we talked about it. We talked about the future, about what we wanted, about how to build something that would last. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. By early September, Vin and I had settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. He'd returned to Greenville and picked up a few smaller restoration projects, working from a studio space he rented near the Swamp Rabbit Trail. I continued my work with the city, navigating the usual mix of development reviews and preservation disputes. We spent most evenings together, either at his place or mine. We cooked dinner, watched movies, talked about our days. It was quiet and ordinary, and I loved it, but there were still moments when the old fears resurfaced. One evening in late September, we were at my house, sitting on the back porch. The air was cooling down, the first hint of fall creeping in. We just finished dinner and we were sharing a bottle of wine, talking about nothing in particular. Out of nowhere, Vin said, "Do you ever worry that this won't last?" I looked at him, surprised. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Do you?" He nodded. "I don't want to, but I do." I reached for his hand. "I think that's normal. I think everyone worries about that. I just don't want to lose this," he said quietly. "I don't want to lose you." You won't, I said, not if we keep showing up. Not if we keep being honest with each other. He squeezed my hand. I'm trying, he said. So am I. We sat there for a while holding hands in the gathering dusk. In October, Vin was offered a longer-term project, a 6-month contract restoring a private collection of antique ceramics for a collector in Charleston. It was a significant opportunity both professionally and financially, but it would mean relocating for half a year. He told me about it over dinner at a restaurant on Augusta Street. I haven't decided yet, he said. I wanted to talk to you first. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What do you want to do? I asked. I don't know, part of me wants to take it. It's the kind of project I've been working toward for years, but part of me doesn't want to leave again. I took a breath, trying to be honest. I don't want you to leave, I said. But I also don't want you to turn down something this important because of me. He looked at me, his expression serious. What if you came with me? I blinked. What if you came with me to Charleston? You could find work there. You've worked there before. It wouldn't have to be permanent, just 6 months. I hadn't expected that. I don't know if I can just leave my job, I said slowly. I have projects I'm in the middle of, commitments. I know, I'm not saying you have to. I'm just asking if you'd consider it. I didn't answer right away. Over the next few days, I thought about it constantly. I talked to my supervisor at the city, asking hypothetically if there was any way to take a leave of absence. She was sympathetic but realistic. The department was already understaffed, and losing me for 6 months would create serious problems. I could look for temporary work in Charleston, but there was no guarantee I'd find something. And even if I did, it would mean uprooting my life, leaving behind the stability I'd worked hard to build. But the alternative was 6 months apart. I called Vin one evening and told him I couldn't do it. I want to, I said. I really do, but I can't leave my job, not right now. He was quiet for a moment. I understand, he said finally. I do. What are you going to do? I asked. I don't know yet. We didn't talk much after that. 2 days later, he called me and asked if I could come over. When I got to his apartment, he was sitting on the couch looking tired. I turned it down, he said. I stared at him. What? I turned down the Charleston project. Vin, why would you do that? He looked at me, his expression calm but resolute. Because this matters more, he said. You matter more. I don't want to spend 6 months apart. I don't want to put us through that again, so I turned it down. I sat down beside him, struggling to process what he was saying. You shouldn't have done that for me, I said. I didn't do it just for you. I did it for us, for what we're building. I felt a surge of emotion, gratitude and guilt and love all tangled together. Are you going to regret it? I asked. Maybe, he said honestly, but I think I'd regret losing you more. I pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet, he said, but there was a hint of humor in his voice. Over the next few weeks, Vin threw himself into his local work, taking on smaller projects and building relationships with galleries and collectors in the region. He seemed content, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd sacrificed something important. One evening in early November, I brought it up. Do you resent me for the Charleston thing? I asked. He looked at me surprised. No, why would I? Because you gave up something big and I didn't. He set down the book he was reading and turned to face me. Tom, I made a choice. You didn't force me into anything, and honestly, I'm okay with it. I'm more than okay. I'm happy. Are you sure? I'm sure. I wanted to believe him, and mostly I did. In December, we spent the holidays together. We drove down to Folly Beach for a weekend, walking along the shore and talking about the year we'd had. We went to a holiday market in downtown Greenville, drinking hot cider and browsing handmade crafts. On Christmas Eve, we were at my house, sitting by the fireplace. I'd put up a small tree, something I hadn't done in years, and we decorated it together earlier in the week. Vin handed me a small wrapped box. Open it, he said. Inside was a ceramic bowl, small and beautifully made, glazed in deep blue with subtle variations in color. I made it, he said. It's not perfect, but I wanted you to have something I made myself. I turned it over in my hands, feeling the weight of it, the care that had gone into it. It's perfect, I said. He smiled and I leaned over and kissed him. I have something for you too, I said, handing him an envelope. He opened it and pulled out a printout. It took him a moment to understand what he was looking at. Is this a house listing? He asked. It's a place I've been looking at, I said, in the Hampton-Pinckney neighborhood. It's bigger than my place and it has a backyard. I thought maybe if you were interested we could look at it together. Maybe think about moving in together. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. Are you serious? I'm serious. He set the paper down and pulled me into a hug. Yes, he said. Yes, I'm interested. We went to see the house the week after Christmas. It was an old bungalow, modest but well-maintained, with hardwood floors and a front porch. The backyard was small but had potential, and there was a shed that could be converted into a studio. Vin walked through it slowly, taking everything in. I can see us here, he said finally. So can I. We made an offer in early January. It was accepted a week later. By the end of February, we'd moved in together. It wasn't always easy. We had to learn how to share space, how to navigate each other's routines and quirks. We had disagreements about everything from how to organize the kitchen to whose turn it was to take out the trash, but we also had moments of grace. Mornings when I woke up to find him already in the kitchen making coffee. Evenings when we'd sit on the porch watching the sky change colors. Nights when we'd curl up together on the couch, talking or reading or just being. One Saturday in late March, we were working in the backyard, clearing out old leaves and planning where to plant a small garden. Vin was wearing an old t-shirt and jeans, dirt smudged on his cheek, and I remember thinking how much I loved him. What? He asked, catching me staring. Nothing, I said, just happy, he grinned. Me too. We kept working side by side, building something together. In April, we had our first major test. Vin's father, who he hadn't spoken to in years, reached out. It was unexpected and complicated. His father had never accepted Vin being gay, and their relationship had fractured long before I came into the picture. Vin didn't know what to do. We talked about it for hours late into the night. I listened, offering support but not trying to make the decision for him. Eventually, he decided to meet his father for coffee. It didn't go well. His father was civil but distant, and it became clear that he hadn't changed his views. Vin came home that evening looking drained. I'm sorry, I said. It's okay, he said. I think I needed to know. I needed to try. I held him while he processed it, and over the next few days, he worked through the grief and the closure that came with it. It was hard, but we got through it together. By the summer, we'd settled into a life that felt deeply ours. Vin had taken on a major project, working with the city to restore a historic fountain in Falls Park. It was high-profile work, and he was thriving. I'd been promoted to senior cultural heritage planner, which meant more responsibility but also more influence over the projects I cared about. We had friends over for dinner. We went hiking on weekends. We built a small garden in the backyard, planting tomatoes and herbs. One evening in late June, almost exactly a year after that first night when everything changed, we were sitting on the porch. The air was warm, cicadas buzzing in the trees. Do you remember what you said to me that night? Vin asked. Which night? The night I told you I liked you. You said you didn't know what it meant. I smiled. I remember. Do you know now? I thought about it. I think it means showing up, I said. Every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He nodded slowly. I think you're right. We sat there in the fading light, holding hands, building a life one quiet evening at a time. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next.